Hi, I'm Rola. Today I'm going to give you my talk as part of a set of mini keynotes. And the title is To Sustain a Smart, Dependent, and Social Software Ecosystem. So actually, Gregorio, Kelly, and May reached out to me asking, the idea was to give voice to early to mid-career scientists in mini keynotes, 10 to 15 minutes, something interesting and noteworthy. So I got it, something interesting, noteworthy, and hopefully in 8 minutes. As you know, Zoom is a bit different to talks in real life. So I hope I can keep you guys, keep you entertained for at least 8 minutes to get my idea across. So first of all, I just want to say that my work or the work that I've been doing is on top of Giants. It's a product of supervisors, students, and all the other colleagues that work in the same field. So about me, so I graduated in September 2013. MSR 2014 was my first. Then I started as a project researcher. Then in April 2018, I decided to actually have an academic career as an assistant professor. So yeah, if you add all the years up, I'm almost to the mid-career level. And originally I'm from Papua New Guinea, and currently I work in Japan. I am a more empirical software engineering researcher. So I like to work with empirical based evidence. So dependencies, I don't think I need to talk in detail about what are dependencies, because I think every programmer now knows what dependencies are. As you can see in this report from GitHub, almost 80% or more applications code that are stored on GitHub actually comes from dependencies, with JavaScript almost 94%. So I think nowadays the common setting, if you want to start a new project, you can just pick up components from your old project. And in this case, you pick up components from other people's code that is in other projects. However, this was not always the case. So in 2006, developers were less trustful. They're always mistrustful of using other people's code. It's like NCBM, not coded by me. So in this case, only the popular code was trusted. Also, people were more uh, invested in using reliable code rather than using the latest version. They were they didn't really want to get the more riskier latest version that no one else used. So when I started my research, I was looking at library popularity because that was the most related work. However, most of the work was done at the API level, which is the application programming interface level, which is the actual um, methods within those dependencies. So at this case, the only thing that developers were worried about was whenever the function would change or anything would change in a program, this would cause breakage. So usually developers would tell us that if it's not broken, please don't fix it. So getting developers to use the latest version was very difficult, or it was a challenge. However, if we move fast forward to today, developers are trusting so many foreign code. For example, if you look at npm, here in the figure, I think the npm packages now, one simple web page, as you can see, can almost hold like 2 GB of node modules. And node modules, the dependencies have become so heavy. So why has this happened? I think that there's two things that we could probably account for. The first thing is there's so many programming languages now that also have dependencies or use third-party dependencies or foreign code in their code, in their applications. And also the rise of GitHub, which has almost 56 million developers, 60 million repositories. All this available code has developers actually looking online, searching online to grab code as well as components. So it's not only GitHub, but it's also Bitbucket and GitLab. So I'm going to pull the brakes a bit and talk about ecosystem. So I think ecosystem also has a very touchy name, or there's different people have different definitions of the software ecosystem. So just to be clear, the term that we use is basically from Lungu, which says that the software ecosystem is a collection of software systems which are developed and they also co-evolve within the same environment. So in this case, you would see that the dependencies are actually from the same ecosystem, like the NPM, and they all evolve in response to the updates or the changes in the systems around them. So that's what we term software ecosystem. And yeah, just to put that out. So what happens when this trust is broken, or when this trust was broken? So to give you an example, I'll talk about the screen, the first on the top right-hand side. I think now with the pandemic, everyone can relate to this. In Zoom now, you have probably the meeting view zone, which is the one in front of the camera, and then the non-meeting zone, which is the one, which is the rest of your room outside of your camera. So this goes the same, this actually is similar to how people use dependencies. So as you can see in the figure, the comic strip down on the right-hand side, you can see that developers now talk to the code base and say that now the modules are small and so useful. They do show just the top part of it. However, if you look at the bottom, the basement, you can see that there's so many dependencies that work together to get this small package to run. So as we saw before in the previous page. So this can be very scary because sometimes the developers themselves don't know what kind of code they're bringing into their system. So how can this affect developers? There's actually two cases. So the first case, if you're a JavaScript programmer, then you would know this, is that by the left pad, where one programmer broke the whole internet, or parts of the internet, especially the JavaScript parts of the internet, which depended on this small 11 lines of code library. So once it was removed, it created a break in the ecosystem or the dependency chain. And so the rest of the components could not work. So that's one case. The next case is that we don't know whether those dependencies have security vulnerabilities. So there's many cases where security vulnerabilities, or your code, the application is prone to attacks, malicious attacks through the dependencies. So yeah, that's what happens. So from that, from those works, we actually did a study, and we did an empirical study about developers updating their library dependencies, and we found that up to 82% of applications were using outdated dependencies. Furthermore, they were prone to security attacks or vulnerabilities. So this opened up our research. The paper was in 2017, and since that, there have been a lot of work now. Of course, there have been always work at API level, but now also at the library level within the ecosystem, the dependencies, trust, and also with the securities, there's been a lot of work now around these areas. So that's from the research side. If you look on the left-hand side, also in industry, I think there has been a lot of advances, such as Dependabot, which is a bot that actually detects within your dependencies any security risks or vulnerabilities that could be in your dependent code. And also, the GitHub has been, GitHub ecosystem now also has its own set of advisories, as you can see here, that also talk about security vulnerabilities and try to do this detection. So now we find that the research has now moved to the stability of the ecosystem. So actually, now that we've gained trust, the next thing is how to sustain these ecosystems. So actually, the next step, I think, going forward, is actually to see how to sustain these ecosystems, because eventually they still, like any other open source of projects, they need to be, they need to attract, maintain, and sustain themselves. So in my opinion, they come through social collaboration, all these human aspects of research, as well as the knowledge in the documentation, the external resources. This is another set of research that could be also done. And then thirdly, also the technical aspects, looking at the program analysis, code reuse, clones, APIs. This work is still very important. So I think these three parts of research, or these three different components, can actually help us understand a smart and more dependent and social software ecosystem. And basically for the MSR community, I guess what challenges I put together is maybe to how to mine existing and new data sets using novel approaches from the MSR perspective. So I guess this is just scratching the surface. I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity, and I hope it was interesting and something noteworthy. I think I went a bit over 8 minutes, but yeah, hopefully there's more time for Q&A so you can ask me about anything else. Thank you very much. Have a good conference.